at the member from Oshawa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I thank you to the member from Bruce Grey Owen Sound for his encouragement. Although I don't need too much encouragement to undertake this morning's debate, I'm looking forward to sharing our thoughts on this government motion. I'm happy to read the motion so that we all are on the same page, so to speak. That in the opinion of this House, the current government is a government for the people with a clear mandate to pursue policies that put more money in people's pockets, create and protect jobs, address the hydro crisis, reduce hospital wait times, and restore accountability and trust in government. That's the text of the motion, and I'm very glad to be able to take it apart and debate and discuss. This motion, Speaker, holds this government up to be a government for the people, and we hear that ad nauseum. I'd say a government for the people, but I would argue that it is indeed a government for their people, and I am going to proceed to make that argument. But first, I'd like to share with you something that happened in my riding on Sunday. So I had the opportunity to attend an annual rally that they call the Life Rally, and that stands for Love is for Everyone, and it is a group of community members that have come together, I would say, organically through the years, every Sunday from 1 to 3 p.m. at the corner of John and Simcoe, and they give free hugs and free conversations and free sandwiches. And they hold signs that say, ask me why I'm giving out free sandwiches. And people from across the community, those living in the margins, those just driving by, have understood that this group is trying to build a bit of community. Well, they had their annual rally where they had free haircuts. They gave out food. Many different faith groups were there, giving out free food to our street-involved community, to those living in the margins, living with challenges. But I wonder, is this Premier and this government, are they for those people? Are those people part of their people? And at that Life Rally, constituents asked me about social assistance. They asked me about the promised 3% increase, and they were quite concerned. And at that point on Sunday, all I had to go on was what we had heard in this House. And so I shared with them, in response to a question asked by my colleague from Ottawa Centre about whether those on Ontario Works and ODSP recipients would receive the increases in support that they were indeed counting on. And at that time, on the 19th, the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services said, quote, "As you are well aware, I've got 5 ministries coming into one. I'm still being briefed, as I mentioned, on all aspects of my portfolio, but this is a very important one, and I want to make sure that the people, particularly the most vulnerable in our province and in our city, are looked after. Let's face it, true income security in this province will be a job, and we will continue to make sure that people are getting the supports they need in order to work and keep more money that they have. We want to make sure that Ontario is open for business. More people are working in this province and life is more affordable when they drive their car, when they buy their house, or when they send their kid off to university. That's what our focus is going to be. But I can assure you of one thing, Ontario's back." Well, Speaker, when I shared this with individuals who, actually one man who had worked for years and then suffered a health-related injury and is now on ODSP, is not a man who will be able to benefit from a job, is not a man who is worried about car payments or mortgage payments or sending a child to university. You know, this is a government that talks about a hand up, not a hand out, and they say it like that's a statement to be proud of, instead of recognizing that people aren't asking for hand-ups or handouts. They're asking to put one foot in front of the other and be able to just find a path without discrimination and derision, and with a path with dignity so that they can indeed participate in our communities. I'd like to read parts from actually 3 letters. There's a gentleman in my community named Arnaldo, and he's very active in our community and is someone who is also on social assistance, and life has taken a turn for this gentleman. And I will read part of his letters. "My name is Arnaldo. I'm 56 years old. I live in Oshawa, Ontario. The reason that I am writing to you is the fact that I had it all at one point: employment, a fiancé, a car. Now I have nothing. I don't have employment or a fiancé or a car. I am living in poverty. I am on ODSP and CPPD and making approximately $1,100 a month. That is lower than the minimum wage. Under all the rules and regulations I must follow, where does it say I must live in poverty? I have depression, anxiety. I never have a smile on my face. I used to be the life of the party. I am not being heard. My opinion seems not important. I am losing out because I am on ODSP and CPBD. The reason I am writing to you is because of ODSP. I have to pay extra. ODSP does not cover needle and lancets for diabetics. I feel that I am not important. My story does not mean anything. I would like some answers in a positive manner and an increase of ODSP funding so that I can live in dignity. Make some noise and get the Ford government to be accountable to all citizens of Ontario, not a select few. There are 4 years. I don't want to wait 4 years with no positive answers or changes. Thanks, Arnaldo. And I pulled that from 3 letters. We've been advocating for this gentleman for years with the previous government. And unfortunately now, after yesterday's announcement, I have to return to my community and explain to Arnaldo that this government actually unexpectedly stopped the basic income pilot, announced social assistance cuts, ending the basic income pilot. Yes, they had promised in the campaign to see it through. Nope. That was a promise. I don't know why the government members right now are not chanting and seal clapping at this promise, but they promised to see the income pilot through to its end. It was a promise made.
Not good.
Oh, no instinct there to clap. Okay. But I guess they only keep the promises to some of the people. And with the basic income pilot, was it yielding evidence that people cannot actually continue to live in forced poverty? And I know that the press wanted to know at their announcement yesterday about the results of the ongoing pilot that they prematurely stopped. They danced around it, and taxpayer-paid ministry staff apparently clapped them out of the room. This is what we have now when we want answers, when we want better for more people. So the current government is a government for their people. People who need help don't seem to be their people. People who live in poverty don't seem to be their people. Another part of this motion said that they have a mandate to pursue policies that put more money in people's pockets, not the pockets of those who were a part of the basic income pilot, not those who are living without dignity, forced to live in poverty on social assistance, not those people. And Ford's pledge to cancel the minimum wage increase, well, that's not more money for low-income earners, not for their pockets. Another part of this motion is that they had a mandate to create and protect jobs. Well, President Trump's threat to impose tariffs on the automotive sector and auto part import sector would be devastating to Ontario's auto sector. I've asked a question in the legislature. This is something we have been talking about. Ontario has no strategic plan for an industry that accounts for 1/5 or 20% of our GDP. We do need a strategy. The Minister for Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade went to Washington. We want to know what he demanded. We want to know what did this government fight for? In what way did this government stand up for auto? Reassurances aren't going to cut it. We want to know what was accomplished. And a week or two ago, Premier Ford fired Ontario's trade representative in Washington. Okay, that's their right to reassign or reevaluate. But what's the plan now? Do we have a new representative? Is there anyone there on our behalf? And we know, and this government seems to take exception, which I see as a good sign that they would take exception to what I'm going to say now, but Conservatives in the past have said that they would be content to see Ontario's auto sector die. But there wasn't a single mention of auto manufacturing from the Conservatives in the run-up to the election. The PC party promised to kill the Jobs and Prosperity Fund, which invests millions of dollars across the sector. That is what we do know. Now, when I asked the Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade about this, he did say, quote, "I know the NDP have asked this of the former government on many occasions, so I have directed the department to begin work on a comprehensive auto strategy," end quote. Great. Looking forward to that. I have every faith that if we have a comprehensive automotive strategy, that would be a very good thing for Ontario. So we will wait, we will watch, and we will cross our fingers. One other thing that I'll flag for the government, yesterday I introduced what is now Bill 12, reintroduced my Fairness for the Auto Sector Act. So if they're going to stand up for automotive, perhaps they would like to take a look at that and ensure that all workers in Ontario have the same entitlements, that auto workers deserve the same access to leave and entitlements as every other worker as provided by the Employment Standards Act. So what is fair for all should be true for all, not all minus auto workers. So I do hope that the government supports my bill and recognizes that auto workers deserve equal leave and entitlements. So again, as I was saying, the current government is a government for their people. People who work in the automotive sector don't seem to be their people, remains to be seen. Another part of their motion was that they have a mandate to address the hydro crisis. So, Speaker, in my riding, I had collected hydro bills from members, from constituents. I had invited them to drop off their hydro bills, and I sent them across and put them on the desk of the then Premier. It became clear during that exercise that people across my community, and I know across all of our communities, are very upset about hydro costs, rising costs. Interesting, PCs had started privatization under Harris, and that resulted in astronomical rate increases, and that vary wildly depending on where you live. The Fair Hydro Plan, the Liberals' Fair Hydro Plan, has done so much damage and damage heading forward to the next generation. And this government is continuing with it and unfortunately not bringing hydro back into public hands. I'm going to read something. Ontario's deficit is growing and the Fair Hydro Plan is largely to blame. So this is from December of 2017. But the part that I wanted to share, a reminder about just how detrimental this Fair Hydro Plan that this government is continuing with, how challenged we're going to be because of it, that the Financial Accountability Office says that the province will add $75 billion to its debt over the next 4 years. Quote, by 2021-22, the FAO expects the deficit to reach $9.8 billion because the province will no longer be able to rely on one-time revenues, such as the sale of Hydro One. But the biggest piece of the puzzle is the Fair Hydro Plan. The Progressive Conservatives were eager to jump on the FAO's report. Quote, it's distressing to hear another story like this that shows that the Liberals aren't being honest with the people of Ontario about the province's fiscal realities, end quote, said Todd Smith, the PC energy critic. Hey, I know that guy. Okay. It continues. The government announced its Fair Hydro Plan, a subsidy that was not included in government accounting because funding for the rate cut is being borrowed through Ontario Power Generation. The AG said at the time of her report's release that the move will cost taxpayers an extra $4 billion in interest on the debt over the course of the program. The FAO expects that the Fair Hydro Plan will increase program spending by an average of $2.8 billion per year. Speaker, this team is okay with that. They are continuing with that Fair Hydro Plan, which is a challenge. So I would say, you know, the current government is a government for their people. People who are worried about hydro debt for their children don't seem to be their people. Also part of their motion says that they have a mandate to reduce hospital wait times. The Premier's mental health funding cut of $330 million annually isn't going to help reduce hospital wait times. So I'm happy to read from this article, Tories blasted for $335 million cut in planned spending on mental health. Quote, Health Minister Christine Elliott is under fire for cutting $335 million from planned mental health funding in Ontario this year. So, but that means a planned $525 million annual injection in new funding has been reduced to $190 million. It begs the question, why is the Premier cutting new funding for mental health by $330 million a year? And Speaker, this is not going to help reduce hospital wait times. People struggling with mental health cannot get help. There isn't enough help across our communities. We don't have the services. We aren't prioritizing mental health care, and cutting mental health funding is wrong. And Speaker, the enthusiastic member from King Vaughan can think that cutting mental health funding is the right thing to do, is the right path. I'm not sure why the enthusiastic heckling, but the only paths that exist for people struggling with the mental health crisis right now are jail or the hospital. And our police are interfacing with crisis every day, Speaker. What are their options? De-escalation? Absolutely, of course. But then what happens? People in crisis may or may not be capable of de-escalation because that is the nature of mental health crisis. So those individuals end up in jail or in the hospitals. If they end up in jail, they're the responsibility then of our correctional workers, our correctional officers and nurses who don't have the tools or resources to provide the support that those struggling with mental health issues require. So, Speaker, again, how does this reduce hospital wait times? And the current government is a government for their people. People who are struggling with mental health, unfortunately, don't seem to be their people. Also part of the motion is that they have a mandate to restore accountability and trust in government. Speaker, we've been talking at length in this House about this government's changing the rules mid-game, their vendetta against, City Council, the Premier's fixation with Toronto, but attacking democracy and rigging a municipal election without consultation. Manipulating regional chair elections. A reminder, because what we say in this legislature we are supposed to stand by, but the now Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing back in 2012 said it speaks to the very core of our democracy. And sorry, this was on the Municipal Amendment Act regarding the election of chair of York Region. Quote, I know the experience they've had in their regions, and I know that the politicians in Durham are very excited about this and about their opportunity as well. The folks in York Region have looked at this as a very positive change, so I hope that members will support this legislation, and perhaps we can expand it at some point down the road for all regions in the province of Ontario. End quote. My, how things change. But if we're going to talk about accountability and trust in government, I seem to remember leading up to the election that there were, and I don't remember what the number landed at, 29 individuals being investigated for the 407 data breach scandal or whatever that is that's brewing. That is ongoing. And Speaker, that does not help folks have trust in government when that is looming, when that is hovering, sort of this stench of fraud that is hovering. This is a government that did not have a mandate to cut social assistance rates, that they actually campaigned while they campaigned that they were going to see that basic income pilot all the way through. Just kidding, promise made, no, start the car, like what? But the other thing is no consultation when it comes to City Hall in Toronto, but promised consultations when it comes to the health and physical education curriculum and the growth and development or sex ed expectations. To call it a curriculum is interesting. It's a few expectations, but that seems to be steered by extremists and people who seem to want to take us back in time when it comes to health and well-being and sexual health and safety. This is a government that didn't have a platform leading into the election. This is a government that has been focusing on the feds when it comes to immigration and trying desperately to wiggle their way out of their legal provincial responsibilities to newcomers, people seeking refuge and asylum. Their provincial responsibilities, whether they want them or not, doesn't mean that they don't have them. They've been celebrating legislating workers back to work, signaling once again to employers that they don't have to bargain in good faith, because this government will give them a sneaky way out of having to negotiate with their employees for improved working and, in this case, learning conditions. That is a shame. That is not something to celebrate. Undermining, collective bargaining is problematic. When it comes to the wind farm and some of the legislation we've already seen, this government has found an escape hatch to slip out of its own contracts, which signals to businesses that while this government says they are open for business, it actually means that businesses had better be wary, because entering into a contract with this government will actually leave businesses open. So, in summary, this is quite a motion. I have a few friendly amendments to offer, that in the opinion of this House, the current government is a government for the people who aren't doing their best to survive on social assistance. For the people.
Look, things are going along pretty good. I also want to remind everyone in the legislature that if there's going to be some what I call chirping, one must be in their own seat to do so. Surprise, surprise. But that's the way we conduct business here in the legislature. So, we will return back to the member from Oshawa and start the clock again.
Thank you, Speaker. So again, in summary, as we've been debating this motion, I have a few friendly amendments to add. That in the opinion of this House, the current government is a government for the people who aren't doing their best to survive on social assistance, for the people who don't have disabilities, for the people who don't live in poverty, for the people who don't live in the margins, for the people who don't cost money, who don't earn minimum wage, who don't work in the automotive sector, who don't mind if hydro debt is passed on to their children, for people who don't struggle with mental health and addictions, who don't believe children should learn about consent, healthy relationships, family diversity, healthy bodies, LGBTQ issues, or online safety, for the people who do not come to Canada or Ontario seeking refuge or asylum, who do not belong to a union or have bargained collective agreements, and for the people who do not expect this government to honour its contracts. In short, the current government is a government for their people. And I would ask the actual people of Ontario who are watching the shenanigans of this Premier and government whether or not they are indeed the right sort of people, if they are indeed the very few people that this government purports to represent. Thank you, Speaker.